They told her it was the most sacred night of her life. The priests of Valdoria swore that if a maiden of noble blood missed the royal betrothal ceremony, she would be stripped of her house name and cast out to live among the beggars. But when Lady Alara Ashwood heard the clash of steel and the scream of a dying horse echoing through the forest glen, she didn't think about finding a husband. She didn't think about her stepmother's threats. She thought about the healer's oath she'd sworn in secret. She dragged a wounded knight from beneath his fallen destrier, bound his mortal wounds with strips of her own silk underskirts, and fled before his guards found her. She didn't know the man bleeding in her arms was the crown prince. And she certainly didn't know that by saving him, she had just made herself the target of every rival house in the kingdom. This is the story of the girl who chose mercy over a marriage and inherited a war. The mist in Thornwood didn't just rise. It devoured sound itself. Lady Alara Ashwood gripped the reins of her aging mare, her fingers cramping against the worn leather. The animal's hooves were stumbling over roots in the dimming twilight. The bells of the great cathedral echoed through the valley, their song a mocking countdown. 2 hours until sundown. The betrothal ceremony began at the first star. "Move, Aster," she whispered to the mare, her heart a war drum against her ribs. "We can still make it. Just don't throw a shoe now." She was wearing a gown of crimson silk embroidered with the silver roses of House Ashwood, a dress that had taken 3 seamstresses a month to create. It was modest by court standards, elegant, and completely ruined by the mud splattered across the hem. Tonight was the night the unmarried daughters of the 12 great houses and visiting lords would be presented to the crown. It was the night she might finally escape the venom of living under the authority of her stepmother, Lady Morgana. Morgana, who treated Alara less like a ward and more like an unpaid servant. If Alara secured a betrothal tonight, she could leave. She could reclaim her mother's dowry. She could finally breathe. She urged Aster down the narrow forest path that wound toward the castle, the trees pressing close like disapproving chaperones. Then she heard it. The crash of metal. The wet, desperate gasp of a man drowning in his own blood. Alara's hands tightened on the reins. "Don't stop." A selfish voice in her head hissed, "If you stop, you'll be late. If you're late, the Queen will bar the gates. You'll be the disgrace of your house, again." She dug her heels into Aster's flanks, but then a beam of dying sunlight broke through the canopy. She saw them, 3 armored knights scattered across the forest floor. One was pinned beneath a massive warhorse. Blood pooled black in the moss. "Damn it," Alara breathed. She yanked the reins. Aster whinnied in protest as they veered off the path and crashed through the underbrush. Alara didn't think about the crimson silk. She didn't think about Morgana's sneer or the Queen's cold dismissal. She was a secret apprentice to the village healer, trained in the hidden arts her stepmother had forbidden. The instinct to save was louder than the instinct to obey. But before we dive in, I need to ask you something that truly matters to me. If you've enjoyed my stories before, or if you're here hoping this one will move you, please don't leave without subscribing. Without your subscription, YouTube buries everything I create. The people searching for stories that make them feel something, stories about resilience, love, impossible choices, they'll never find them. Because the algorithm decided I wasn't worth showing. I'm not asking for money. Just 30 seconds to hit that subscribe button so others can discover these stories too. I pour everything I have into every word, every character, every chapter. And knowing I could reach someone who desperately needs it but won't because you didn't click, that genuinely breaks my heart. Please subscribe. It costs you nothing, but to me, it means someone believes these stories matter. Now let's continue. The forest floor was a graveyard of metal and flesh. Ilara dropped from Astor's saddle before the mare had fully stopped, her boots sinking into earth that smelled of copper and crushed pine. The largest knight, the one trapped beneath the warhorse, wasn't moving. His armor was dented inward at the ribs. Fatal. But the second knight, propped against an oak tree with his hand pressed to his throat, was still breathing in wet, rattling gasps. She ran to him first. "Hold still," she commanded, dropping to her knees. The crimson silk of her gown spread across the moss like a pool of wine. His eyes, pale gray, shocked wide, fixed on her face. He tried to speak. Blood bubbled at his lips. "I said hold still." Ilara ripped the sleeve from her gown and pressed it against the gash in his neck. Not deep enough to sever the artery, but close. Too close. Her hands moved with the mechanical precision her mentor had drilled into her during those forbidden midnight lessons in the healer's cottage. Pressure. Elevation. Assessment. The third knight was 20 paces away, face down in a carpet of fallen leaves. She could see the slow rise and fall of his back. Alive, but unconscious. She would get to him next. Then she saw the fourth man. He was half hidden in the shadow of a massive ironwood tree, his back against the trunk, one gauntlet hand clutched over his abdomen. His armor was black as a raven's wing, trimmed in silver that caught the dying light. No house sigil. No standard. Just that unadorned, expensive black plate that only royalty or assassins could afford. His head was tilted back, eyes closed. For a moment, Ilara thought he was dead. Then his chest moved. Shallow. Labored. She tied off the makeshift bandage on the first knight's neck and scrambled across the clearing. The bells of the great cathedral tolled again in the distance. 1 hour. She had 1 hour left, and she was elbow-deep in someone else's blood. "My lady," the gray-eyed knight rasped behind her. "Leave him. You must." "I must do no such thing," Ilara snapped. She knelt beside the man in black and carefully pried his hand away from his stomach. The blood was dark, almost black. Gut wound. Possibly liver. She had minutes, not hours. His eyes opened. Gold. Burning. Impossibly, devastatingly alive. And for one breathless moment, the forest went silent. Ilara woke to the sound of a bolt sliding home. Her eyes cracked open to darkness and the smell of hay, leather, and horse dung. Not her chamber. Not even the servants' quarters. The stables. Lady Morgana had locked her in the stables. She sat up too quickly. Her head spun, and pain lanced through her shoulders. Every muscle in her body screamed from the night before, from dragging armored men across forest floors, from stitching wounds by moonlight with nothing but a sewing needle and thread stolen from her own hem. Her crimson gown was ruined beyond repair, stiff with dried blood and torn to rags at the sleeves. The betrothal ceremony. She had missed it. Completely, catastrophically missed it. Footsteps echoed across the cobblestones outside. Ilara pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly, and pressed her ear to the rough wooden door. "You're lucky the queen didn't have you whipped." Morgana's voice was silk over a blade. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Lord Tavish was prepared to offer for you. A widower, yes, but respectable. Wealthy. And you You disappear into the forest like some feral peasant and return at dawn covered in God knows what. I was helping. You were humiliating this house. The words cracked like a whip. The Queen herself asked where Lady Ashwood's ward had gone. I had to tell her you took ill. Do you understand what that makes me look like? What that makes you look like? Elara closed her eyes. She could still see those golden eyes staring up at her from the shadows. She had kept him alive. Barely. By the time his guards had finally found them, drawn by the gray-eyed knight's weak shouts, the man in black armor had been pale as parchment, his breathing shallow. She had packed the wound with moss and spiderwebs, wrapped his torso in strips of her own underskirts, and prayed to God she wasn't sure existed. Then she had run. Before they could ask her name. Before they could see the silver roses embroidered on her ruined collar. You'll stay here until I decide what to do with you, Morgana continued. No food. No water. Perhaps hunger will teach you the obedience your mother failed to instill. The footsteps retreated. Elara sank back down into the hay, her hands still trembling. She had saved a man's life. And she had just destroyed her own. The great doors of Ashwood Manor opened at noon with a sound like thunder. Elara heard it even from the stables, the crash of iron-banded oak against stone, followed by the sharp, terrified silence that only royalty could command. She pressed her face to the gap in the door, squinting toward the main house. Horses. At least a dozen, their coats gleaming like polished obsidian. And riders in black armor with silver trim. The royal guard. Her stomach dropped. Lady Morgana Ashwood. The voice that rang across the courtyard was deep, authoritative, and utterly without warmth. I require an audience. Immediately. Elara's breath caught. She knew that voice. She had heard it rasping in pain, gasping for air as she'd pressed moss and spiderwebs into a wound that should have killed him. The man in the black armor. The one with the golden eyes. Your Highness. Morgana's voice floated from the manor steps, honey-sweet and panicked. We are honored beyond measure. Please, come inside. I'll have refreshments brought. I'm not here for refreshments. Through the crack, Elara watched as a figure dismounted. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Moving with the careful precision of someone who had been recently, grievously injured. He wore no helmet now, and even from this distance she could see dark hair and a profile that could have been carved from marble. He held something in his hand. Something red. No. Elara's heart stopped. No, no, no. It was a strip of crimson silk. The piece she had torn from her sleeve to bind the gray-eyed knight's throat. I'm looking for the woman who saved my life 2 nights ago, the man said. His voice carried across the courtyard like a bell. She wore a dress of this color. She bore the silver rose of House Ashwood. And she disappeared before I could learn her name. The silence that followed was suffocating. Your Highness, Morgana began, her voice tight, I assure you, there has been some mistake. My stepdaughter was. Your stepdaughter. The words were flat. Final. Where is she? Elara's hands shook against the wooden door. She should stay hidden. She should stay silent. Whatever was about to happen, it would be safer if he never found her. But then she heard the bolt rattle. And Morgana's voice, cold as winter stone, she's in the stables. Your Highness, I must warn you, the girl is unwell. Unstable. Whatever she told you. The door exploded inward. Golden eyes found hers. And the world tilted. He looked like death warmed over. The man in the doorway swayed slightly, one hand braced against the frame. His face was pale beneath Thetan, and there were shadows under those burning gold eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and wounds not fully healed. But he was standing. Alive. And staring at Alara like she was a ghost he'd been hunting. "You," he breathed. Morgana appeared behind him, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Your Highness, please. The girl is simple-minded. She doesn't understand." Simple-minded. He didn't look away from Alara. "Is that what you call a woman who can perform battlefield surgery with a sewing needle? She missed the betrothal ceremony. She shamed this house. I was within my rights to discipline. You locked her in a stable." His voice dropped to something deadly quiet. "Like an animal. She disobeyed. She saved my life." He took a step into the stable, and two of the royal guard moved with him like shadows. "And the lives of 3 of my men." While every noble daughter in the kingdom was preening in the great hall, this woman was in the forest pulling knights from beneath dead horses. Alara's throat was too tight to speak. She was filthy, covered in hay and dried blood, her hair a tangled mess. And he was looking at her like she was something precious. "Lady Alara Ashwood," he said, and the formal use of her name made her knees weak. "I am Crown Prince Caspian Valder. By the law of the Old Kingdom, you are owed a blood debt. I invoke the right of sanctuary." Morgana's gasp was sharp. "You cannot." "I can." Caspian's eyes finally left Alara's face, turning to Morgana with an expression of pure contempt. "The right of sanctuary supersedes all house authority. Lady Alara is under royal protection. She will return with me to the capital. Immediately. She has no dowry. No reputation. You would bring shame." "The only shame here," Caspian interrupted softly, "is that a woman of her skill and courage was locked in filth by her own family." He extended his hand toward Alara. She stared at it, the calloused palm, the faint tremor that betrayed his exhaustion. "Come with me," he said quietly. "Please." Alara looked past him to Morgana's white, furious face. To the manor that had been her prison. To the life she had been drowning in. She took his hand. And walked into the light. The royal palace was a beautiful prison. Alara stood at the window of her assigned chambers, plural, larger than the entire ground floor of Ashwood Manor, and watched the sun set over the capital. The room was appointed in midnight blue velvet and silver filigree. A canopy bed that could sleep 4. A writing desk inlaid with mother-of-pearl. A wardrobe already filled with gowns she hadn't asked for and couldn't afford. She was 20 stories above the street. High enough that the people below looked like ants. High enough that jumping would be a very permanent solution. "My lady." The voice behind her was soft, deferential. One of the 3 handmaids who had been assigned to her the moment she'd arrived. "The prince has requested your presence at dinner. Shall I prepare?" "No." Alara didn't turn from the window. "Tell His Highness I'm indisposed." A pause. "My lady, the prince, does not make requests lightly." "Then he'll have to learn." The handmaid retreated with a whisper of skirts. Alara pressed her forehead against the cold glass. She had been here 3 days. 3 days of baths and fittings and courtiers whispering behind fans as she walked past. 3 days of servants who called her, my lady, but watched her like she might steal the silverware. 3 days of wandering marble halls that echoed with her footsteps and made her feel more alone than she ever had in Morgana's house. At Ashwood, she'd known her place. Servant. Burden. Unwanted ward. The roles were cruel, but they were clear. Here, she was something else entirely. A curiosity. A mystery. The girl who saved the crown prince. They looked at her like she was a puzzle to be solved or a threat to be neutralized. And Caspian, Crown Prince Caspian, she had to remember to use his title, had been conspicuously absent. Too injured to leave his chambers, they said. Under physician's orders to rest. But she'd seen the guards outside his door, the constant stream of counselors and military advisors. He wasn't resting. He was ruling. And she was here. Trapped in velvet and silk, 20 stories above the world, unable to leave without an escort and forbidden to practice the healing arts that had brought her here in the first place. The door opened without a knock. Caspian stood on the threshold, still pale, still moving carefully. But his eyes were sharp. "You're avoiding me," he said. "You're a quick study, Your Highness." His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "We need to talk." Caspian closed the door behind him and leaned against it like he needed the support. Ilara's healer instincts flared before she could stop them. "You shouldn't be walking. That wound is healing slower than it should." He pushed off the door and crossed to the sitting area, lowering himself into a chair with visible effort. "Which is why I'm here. I need your expertise, not your courtesy." She stayed by the window, arms crossed. "You have a dozen court physicians who tell me what I want to hear." His golden eyes locked onto hers. "You don't strike me as the type to sugarcoat. You barely know me. I know you pulled me from beneath 300 pounds of dead horse. I know you packed a gut wound with forest moss because it was all you had. I know you ran before my guards could thank you." He paused. "And I know you're the only person in this palace who isn't terrified of me." Ilara studied him. The pallor of his skin. The way he held himself too carefully, like breathing hurt. "Show me the wound." He didn't hesitate. Within moments his doublet was unlaced, the bandages underneath stained yellow-green at the edges. Ilara crossed the room and knelt beside his chair, her hands moving with professional detachment as she peeled back the dressing. The wound was angry. Hot to the touch. The edges were inflamed, and there was a smell, faint, but unmistakable. "This isn't infection," she murmured. Her fingers traced the area around the injury, feeling for the telltale heat patterns her mentor had taught her to recognize. "Or not just infection. When did you first feel ill?" 2 days before the attack. Headache. Nausea. I thought it was exhaustion." Ilara's blood went cold. "And the night of the attack? Before the ambush?" "Dizzy. My hands were shaking. I thought," he stopped. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You think I was poisoned. I think someone made sure you'd be weak when they struck." She sat back on her heels, mind racing. "Something slow acting. Probably in your food or wine. Enough to cloud your reflexes, slow your reaction time. The ambush wasn't about killing me quickly." His voice was flat. "It was about making sure I couldn't fight back. And when I stopped the bleeding, I saved you from the wound. But the poison is still in your system. Elara met his eyes. Someone in this palace tried to murder you, Your Highness. And they're still here. The handmaids descended on her like a flock of purposeful birds. Elara had barely finished treating Caspian's wound, drawing out the poison with a poultice of charcoal and wintergreen she bullied the kitchen staff into providing, when they swept into her chambers with armfuls of silk and boxes of jewelry that could ransom a small army. The winter solstice ball is tomorrow night, the head handmaid announced, a severe woman named Katrin who ran the household staff like a military commander. His Highness has requested your presence. You will be presented to the court. I don't need to be presented. You saved the crown prince's life. Katrin's tone brooked no argument. The entire kingdom knows your name. If you don't appear, rumors will spread. Rumors that His Highness is hiding you. Rumors about why. Elara understood the unspoken threat. In the 3 days since her arrival, she'd heard the whispers. The base-born healer who bewitched the prince. The desperate ward trading favors for a place at court. The girl with no dowry and no family worth mentioning, somehow living in the royal palace. Fine, she said. But nothing excessive. Katrin's smile was sharp. My lady, this is the winter solstice ball. Excessive is the minimum requirement. What followed was hours of systematic transformation. They scrubbed her skin with rosewater and honey until it glowed. They tamed her wild curls into an elegant cascade of braids and pins, woven through with silver thread that caught the candlelight. They painted her face with such subtle skill that she looked like herself, but polished into something almost ethereal. And then came the dress. It was the color of deep wine, darker than blood, with a bodice that hugged her form before flowing into a skirt that moved like water. The neckline was modest, a concession to her protests, but the sleeves were sheer silk that left her arms bare. Silver embroidery traced the hem and cuffs in patterns that resembled both roses and thorns. You look like a queen, one of the younger maids whispered. I look like a target, Elara corrected, staring at her reflection. This wasn't her. This creature in the mirror, draped in silk and silver, was someone designed to be seen. To be noticed. To draw every eye in the ballroom. Katrin adjusted the final pin in Elara's hair. His Highness will meet you at the grand staircase at 8. Elara took a breath. She had survived Morgana's cruelty. She had survived an ambush in a dark forest. Surely she could survive one night with the wolves of the court. The ballroom was a glittering battlefield. Elara stood at the top of the grand staircase, Caspian's hand resting lightly at her elbow, and watched 300 of the kingdom's most powerful people turn to stare. The orchestra faltered for half a beat before recovering. Conversations died mid-sentence. Fans snapped open to hide whispered observations that still managed to carry across the marble floor. That's her. The healer girl. I heard she was practically feral when they found her. Caspian's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on her arm. A warning or a reassurance, she couldn't tell. He looked every inch the crown prince tonight, black and silver formal attire, his dark hair swept back, the pallor of recent injury replaced by careful cosmetics. Only Elara knew how much effort it had cost him to stand upright. Breathe, he murmured. They can smell fear. Comforting. His mouth quirked. Then they descended. The crowd parted like a sea, and Elara felt the weight of their judgment with every step. Ladies in jeweled gowns looked her up and down with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Lords assessed her like livestock at market. And there, near the refreshment tables, stood a cluster of women who watched her approach with the focused malice of hunting cats. Lady Seraphine Blackthorn. Blonde, beautiful, and daughter of the Lord High Chancellor. The woman who had been expected to catch the prince's attention at the betrothal ceremony. The woman whose plans Alara had inadvertently destroyed by bleeding in a forest instead. Your Highness. Seraphine's curtsy was perfect, her smile poisonous. How wonderful to see you recovered. And your guest. How rustic. Lady Alara saved my life, Caspian said evenly. I consider that far more valuable than being on time to a party. The barb landed. Color rose in Seraphine's cheeks. But before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the main doors. Alara turned to see a familiar figure pushing through the crowd, Morgana, dressed in emerald silk, her face a mask of false concern. Alara, darling. Her voice carried across the ballroom. Thank heavens you're safe. When you disappeared, I was beside myself with worry. His Highness, you must forgive her, she's been unwell, prone to episodes. Every eye in the room swiveled to Alara. Caspian's hand moved to the small of her back. Steadying. Claiming. Lady Morgana, he said quietly. I believe you're mistaken. The music stopped. The servant appeared at Caspian's elbow with impeccable timing, bearing a silver tray with 2 crystal flutes of champagne. Alara's instincts screamed. Something was wrong. The servant's hands trembled slightly. His eyes darted toward the exit. And there, just there, in the candlelight, a thin film of residue on the rim of the glass nearest Caspian. Colorless. Nearly invisible. But Alara had spent months grinding herbs with her mentor, learning to identify toxins by sight and smell. Wolfsbane oil. The same poison slowly killing him from the inside. Caspian reached for the glass. Alara moved without thinking. Her hand shot out and struck the flute from the tray. Crystal shattered against marble. Champagne splashed across the prince's boots and the hem of Lady Seraphine's gown. The ballroom went absolutely silent. What in God's name? Seraphine shrieked. But Alara wasn't looking at her. She was staring at the pooled liquid on the floor, watching it eat away at the polish on the marble, leaving a faint discoloration. Acid burn. Just like the edges of Caspian's wound. That champagne was poisoned, Alara said clearly. Loudly enough for the entire ballroom to hear. Chaos erupted. The servant bolted. 2 royal guards tackled him before he reached the doors, driving him to the ground with brutal efficiency. The ladies screamed. Lords surged forward, hands on sword hilts. And Seraphine stood frozen, her face white, champagne dripping from her dress. Caspian's hand found Alara's wrist, steadying her trembling fingers. Are you certain? Look at the floor. She pointed to the smoking marble. Wolfsbane mixed with aqua regia. It would have killed you in minutes. His jaw tightened. He turned to the struggling servant, now pinned beneath 3 guards. Who sent you? The man spat blood. Long live the true king. Then he bit down. Hard. Within seconds, foam appeared on his lips. Poison tablet, hidden in a false tooth. He convulsed once and went still. The ballroom dissolved into pandemonium. But through it all, Alara felt the weight of eyes on her back. She turned slowly and met Lady Seraphine's gaze. The blonde woman was staring at her with an expression of pure, undiluted hatred. Twice, Caspian murmured beside her. You've saved me twice. Someone really wants you dead, Your Highness. Yes. His voice was cold as winter steel. And now they know you're standing in their way. Caspian dismissed the court with a single gesture and dragged Alara to his private study. The room was all dark wood and military maps, the walls lined with weapons that looked well used rather than decorative. He locked the door behind them, then leaned against it like the weight of the crown had finally become too much to bear. You need to leave the capital, he said. Tonight. I'll provide an escort, funds, a new identity. Anywhere you want to go. Alara stared at him. You're sending me away. I'm keeping you alive. He pushed off the door, crossing to the sideboard where a decanter of amber liquid sat waiting. He poured 2 glasses with shaking hands. They tried to kill me twice. Both times, you stopped them. You think they'll let that stand? You think they won't come for you next? And you think running will help? She took the offered glass but didn't drink. They already know my face. My name. Where I come from. Which is why you need a new name. He drained his glass in one swallow. Alara, listen to me. There are things about this court, about me, that you don't understand. Then explain. I can't. The words came out raw. Because if I do, you'll be in even more danger than you already are. I'm already locked in a tower, surrounded by people who want to kill you and probably me. How much more danger could there possibly be? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really want to know? He set down his glass and turned to face her fully. The reason is that someone is trying to poison me. The reason half the court looks at me like I'm a monster. The reason my own father's council is plotting against me. Alara waited. I'm cursed. The confession fell between them like a stone into still water. The Valder bloodline carries a condition. We don't form normal attachments. We don't marry for love. We can't. The royal line has been strategically bred for centuries to eliminate that weakness. That's insane. That's politics. His golden eyes burned into hers. But when you touched me in that forest, when your hands were covered in my blood, something broke. Or maybe something finally worked the way it was supposed to. I don't know. He took a step toward her. What I do know is that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. That every instinct I have screams to keep you close. To protect you. To. He stopped himself. To what? Alara's voice was barely a whisper. To claim you. The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and irrevocable. Which is exactly what will get us both killed.